I used to love the summer holidays as a kid. My parents would always take me and my younger brother camping, but this camping trip was different to the others. Me and my brother were getting older. I was going on 16 at the time, and my brother was 14. I asked my parents if we could have our own tent instead of sharing the big tent like we always did. They wasn't keen on the idea, but eventually they agreed. Our 2-man tent was pitched next to my parents'. Earlier in the day we had met 2 sisters about the same age as me and my brother. We decided to secretly meet up later that night in the woods after our parents had settled down for the night. About midnight we crept out of our tent and ran to the edge of the woods where the 2 sisters were already waiting. We started kissing and messing around, drinking a bit of alcohol, when we saw the camp security guard walking nearby. One of the sisters shouted out something. The security guard shone his torch and began walking towards us. Then one of them threw the now empty alcohol bottle at him. The security guard began shouting and chased us as we ran, laughing, deeper into the woods. It wasn't long before we lost him, as he was kind of old and overweight. We carried on walking, not realising how deeper into the woods we were going. Then my brother spotted a fire burning in the distance. We walked towards it, hiding behind trees to get a closer look. Circled around the fire, we could see about a dozen figures. They were all dressed similar in dark hooded robes, and they were listening to a man who was chanting something in a weird language. It looked strange and eerie, like something out of a horror movie. Had we stumbled across some sort of cult? I don't know, and none of us wanted to hang around to find out. When we turned to walk away, a hooded figure stood right in front of us. We all began to run, but the hooded figure grabbed hold of my arm. After a brief struggle, I managed to break free and catch up with the others. We ran and walked all the way back to the camp and made it to the tents without the security guard seeing us. But for the rest of the holiday, me and my brother slept back in our parents' tent and avoided the 2 girls. This happened in my teenage years. My older brother and a friend from high school went camping in nearby woods. It wasn't a designated camping area, and there were no facilities. We just thought it would be fun to camp out in the wild for the night. As we walked deeper into the woods, I noticed a no trespassing sign. We pitched our tent and lit a small fire, spending the night eating and drinking and telling each other scary stories. But every now and then we would hear a rustling and twigs snapping nearby. The first few times this happened, we went to investigate, but we couldn't see anything. So when we heard it again, my brother said we should ignore it, that it was probably just a small animal or something. But I wasn't so sure and had an eerie feeling that we were being watched. We stayed up till the early hours of the morning before deciding to get our heads down. Inside the tent we zipped ourselves up in sleeping bags. My brother and friend seemed to drop off to sleep pretty quick, but I couldn't help feeling somebody or something was out there. After a while, I guess I must have drifted off to sleep because I was woken by rustling noises outside the tent. I sat up looking at the moving silhouette of the tree branches through the tent canvas. I couldn't have been asleep long because I could hear the fire still burning. Then I saw the silhouette of a man and dog walking closely around the tent. I quickly woke my brother and friend, pointing at the man and dog. For a moment we sat frozen in silence. Then the dog began growling, nudging its face at the front of the tent where the zip was. Suddenly the man began hitting the tent with some sort of bat. We all started screaming and shouting, covering our heads with our hands to protect ourselves. The dog was now barking loudly and the tent collapsed in a heap on top of us. This lasted for about a minute, but it felt much longer before we heard the man and dog walk away. This wasn't exactly a camping trip. It was one night in a tent in my parents' back garden. I was about 10 years old and it was the summer holidays. We were due to go on a camping holiday in a week's time, but me and my younger brother couldn't wait, so we convinced our parents to try out the new tent in our back garden. We pitched the tent in the early evening when it was still light. We took food and drinks and played some games, but when it started to get dark, my younger brother decided he didn't want to sleep in the tent anymore and went back into the house. My mum and dad came to check on me and asked if I wanted to come back into the house as well, but I told them I was fine. I wasn't scared of the dark or being on my own at that age, but when the night grew dark and silent, I began to feel a bit vulnerable on my own, with no solid walls around me. I laid there listening to the sounds of the night for a while, then I drifted off to sleep. After a while I woke to what sounded like a dog growling. I sat up and listened, and remembered our new neighbour had a dog. The new neighbour only moved in a couple of days before and had a big Rottweiler dog, which we saw sometimes out in their garden. It was now pitch black outside and could hear the dog growling and jumping at the fence. Then I heard a snapping type sound, like wood breaking. I turned on my torch and could see the silhouette of the dog near the tent, but as soon as the light went on, the dog began attacking the tent. The dog was now barking loudly, clawing its way through the tent at the zipper end. I could see its dark, manic face and sharp teeth inching closer and closer towards me. I began crying and shouting for my parents. Then all of a sudden I heard the dog yelp and be pulled away from the tent. The zipper went up and I saw the face of my dad, telling me it's okay and that it was safe to come out. When I stepped out of the tent, I saw its owner leading the dog away on a lead through a hole in the fence. I had never felt so scared in my entire life. I never camped in the back garden ever again.